last week we talked about Pilgrim's Prayer. Some time ago, I distributed a book of Gordon Lindsay. It's a little booklet. I think the title is The Art of Successful Prayer. That's the title, DJ, right? And I don't know if some of you got a copy of that. But tonight, I'm going to talk about the art of listening to God, because we're talking about restoring our communication with God. Most people, when they start praying, it's all talking. Some people actually, they talk a lot. They don't know how to carry on a conversation. Have you ever talked to somebody and you'll discuss one topic with them and then they'll change it? Without any translation, they'll just change it. They don't know how to carry on a conversation. There are people who are like that. They grow old, and in fact, they will die without knowing how to have conversation. Conversation is an exchange of ideas. It's hitting one topic, staying on it until you move to the next topic. Because it's a dialogue. If I discuss one topic with you, and then you try to change it, then you're not interested in having a conversation with me. Now, God is a conversational God. And we will find it in the book of Genesis, starting on the chapter that says that He walks in the cool of the day. And so God is interested in having an exchange with us. However, sometimes we don't know how to carry on a conversation. The Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, Trump went there the first time when he was president, and immediately it was in the news because they asked the Queen, so how was the conversation that you had with Trump? And the Queen just simply made a sign. He said, what he was saying is, that guy couldn't stop but talk. You like to have a conversation with somebody that when you are talking, they are intently listening to you. John and I were in the boat in Turkey. We were in the Mediterranean Sea, and I know what he was talking about. John was saying something on the table, and so I was listening to him. Later on, at the end of the study, the instructors, we were talking and said, "Oh, you must be pleased with your son." I said, "Why did you say that?" He said, "Because every time he talks, you listen. You're listening." I was tempted to say, "I do that to everybody. When you're talking, I'm interested in listening to you. Because if I don't listen to you, then I will not get your ideas, and I'll just be guessing." That's why what I don't like, and it happened a lot of times. I'll be saying something, and somebody will say, "Well, this is what Pastor said means." Well, I'm in the room. Why are you clarifying what I mean? That's immediately what I say. Why don't you ask me? I'm right there in the room. You see, what I don't like is when somebody says, "I think this is what Pastor said meant." Well, I'm in the room. Are you telling me I don't know how to express myself? That's an insult. What you need to do is to ask me, "Well, Pastor say, what do you mean?" But a lot of people are not interested in listening to what you want to say. And so they would assume they know what you want to say. But they really don't. And I'll tell you this, I will not be surprised if around 50% of the people here don't know how to carry on a conversation. We can talk, but do we know how to carry on a conversation? Conversation is an exchange of ideas. When you say it's an exchange of ideas, I throw an idea. If you like it, you'll take it. If you cannot take it, even if you like it, we're not having a conversation. Okay? What's happening is it's just bouncing on you. At one time, a group of members of this church left the church, old leaders, and well, as usual, I have to discipline one of the children, and my associate before, he was not around, so I called him. I said, "I need to tell you what happened, so you will not be surprised." And I said, "Can we meet so we can discuss this because it will affect the church?" And immediately he told me this. He said, "Oh, they already talked to me." I said, "Oh, yeah, and I'm not interested in having a dialogue with you," he said. I will come and see you, but I will not talk, he said. I will just listen to what you're saying, but I will not talk. You cannot ask for my ideas or opinion. He was my associate. I said, so you are not interested in a dialogue, I said. You are interested in a monologue. And I said, okay, you made your position clear. Now remember, he said that. Now this is the conversation. He told me, well, they already talked to me, and I'm not interested in you listening to my idea. I will listen to you, he said, but I will not talk. Now, because I was listening to him, I put it back to him. So you are not interested in a dialogue. You are interested in a monologue. Therefore, there is no use for us meeting, because what I want is a dialogue. You see, there is no conversation there. There is talking, but there is no conversation. Now, before you get born again, simple question. Did you ever hear the Lord speak to you before you get born again? Be very sure now. Because some of you thought the Lord spoke to you through a dwarf, or to a, how do you call that? Nuno sa punso. Duwindi. Or through a capre, So I'm not talking about those nonsense. But has any of you had a conversation with God before you got born again? Because God had conversations with people who are not of faith in the scriptures. And all of those conversations were basically one way. Okay? It's God saying something, and most of the time they could not understand it, like the Pharaoh of Egypt. There needs to be a Joseph who will make plain the words of the Lord. They have no idea what God was talking about. Why is it that they have no idea what God is talking about? Because there is no point of reference. Now you will find this when Jesus was here. He will say in the Beatitudes, you heard it says, but I say unto you. There's a point of reference. Jesus is having an exchange of ideas with the people, and they are a community of faith, theoretically. And so they have read the Torah, they have heard the rabbis and the priests during that time speak about the word of the Lord. They know of the Mishnah. And there was no Talmud yet, but they know of the Mishnah. They know of the writings. And there is a conversation going on. You can have a conversation with the book. Okay? I do that all the time. When I read a book, I carry on a conversation with the author. That's why I like following authors, because I would say, this is what he said before, this is what he says now. Okay? Now, if you have not heard God speak before, there is no point of reference. How are you going to know whether it is God speaking or not? Because some of us here will begin to say, well, I have an understanding with God. This is what God told me. Me and God were tight. We have an understanding. And yet, you look at the word of the Lord, what you said God told you is opposite of what the word says. So who are you having conversations with? Because God says that His words are eternal. And we keep ignoring that. Like, for example, you look at the feasts of the Lord, you look at the Sabbath celebration. God says, this is a permanent thing. Meaning, you will not abolish that when it comes to Sabbath. So now, Christians keep saying, well, we don't celebrate the Sabbath anymore. Who are you talking to? Because in the Word it says, this is permanent. It's always going to be done. And you look at the book of, it's always going to be done. And so there are some Christians today who says, well, this is New Testament, and so that doesn't work anymore. Well, when I read my Bible, it says that it's permanent. How do you understand permanent? What does permanent mean? Well, it means it stays. So if it stays and you are telling me that the Lord told you it doesn't stay, what is the name of that Lord? Because I'm going to be very certain to you. It's not the Lord of the Bible. Because God doesn't change His mind. You see? Well, it's a different in those days. They have no medicine, so God doesn't heal anymore today. Well, I am the Lord who heals you. That's a present progressive. So if you tell me right now the Lord revealed to you that He doesn't heal anymore, who is that Lord? It must not be the Lord of the Bible, because the Lord of the Bible says, I am the Lord who heals you. You see, there is a point of reference. Now, because we have established that at one time in our lives, we are not all born again. Therefore, there is a big part of our lives we don't know how to talk to God. Now, you get born again. The moment you get born again, do you know how to talk to God? Now, I understand that the moment the Lord convicts you of your sin and you give your life to Jesus, certainly you heard the word of the Lord in your spirit. You heard it. And you feel convicted. But then after that, how do you move on? Okay, how do you move on from that? Well, some people, they decided they will just keep listening to the word of salvation. So God cannot take on a deeper conversation with them. They're just up to being born again. So God can't bring in any new topic. Much like, Paul puts it this way, who had bewitched you? He used two words in the Greek in Galatians chapter 1, and modern man don't like the words, but God used it, so I like to use it. God says, are you morons? Are you idiots? That's what Paul said. He used those two words in the Greek language. Are you morons? Are you idiots? That you started in the faith and you're going to finish up this way? You see, Paul was very upset. But those words were in the scriptures, which means God says, I want to proceed further with you. But you're morons. By the way, you know that morons and idiots are intellectual capacities. You know, you can take it negatively or positively, but an idiot only have this much IQ, and he cannot carry on much deeper conversation. Much like some people that we know. You can only carry on a conversation with them at this level. Like perhaps you can talk to your dog, if you have a dog, or to your cat. How far will your conversation go? DJ talks with her chicken. She even gives them name. And she is convinced they know their name. But I know they don't even know what a name means. You know? But she gives them a name and she is having a conversation with them. When I tell them to look for the chicken, they are looking for the chicken, calling them by name. And I look at that thing and I says, what kind of children did I raise, you know? Having a conversation with the chicken. Is this getting too hot? Perhaps we're at 70. Where was I at? The chicken. Okay, let's move on from the chicken. Okay. So now we have to really learn this art of listening to God. How do you know it is God calling? I hate it when I call my kids and they don't answer. I would like, when they don't answer my phone call, I like to grab that phone from them and don't give them a phone anymore, you know. So all of them, including my wife, before, now she is hard-headed, they assigned a different ringtone. If I'm the one calling, it's a different ringtone. They answer right away. Yeah. Because I demand it has to be answered. What is that? There is a reference point. They know when I'm the one calling. Now they have hardened their hearts. And even if they know I'm the one calling, a lot of times they will not be answering. It still infuriates me. Why? Because I am calling. I want to be answered. Now translate that with God. When God calls upon us, He wants us to respond. But the problem is this: how do we know it's God? Did you assign a ringtone that says, this is God talking? Okay? Now, with that discussion, I forgot the name of this author. It's an associate of John Wimber. He wrote a book entitled Surprised by the Voice of God. He wrote another book, Surprised by the Holy Spirit. But he wrote a book, Surprised by the Voice of God. It's an excellent book. I've read the book. It's an excellent book. But now, there is a book published a few years ago. The title is a yellow book with black letters. Maglit cover, but pretty basic. And this shows the temperature in the church. The title of the book is Nudge. What's that? Nudge. And if you look at that, it's pretty basic. And by the way, the academic community is rejoicing with it. It's a nudge. Meaning, you feel something in your heart, oh, it must be God. And I remember a Methodist bishop, we were in Wheaton, and it was a very small conference, I think around 20 of us. I mean, this is a very good group of people. One of the scholars who went there, he wrote the first history book of Nepal. He said, like the president, the head of the state, the president of Nepal commissioned him to write the history of Nepal. And he was bragging to me about this and all of those things. But the president of the organization during that time was testifying. He said, I was about to go to the hospital, he said. And I was entering to the entrance, and said, I met this man coming from the hospital, and his face is sullen, and his face looks like it is full of problems. So he said, while the guy was walking out and was walking, he said, I felt something inside that I should just greet the man. And so he greeted the guy and he said, hi, how are you doing? And he said, the guy looked back at him in surprise and began to carry on a short conversation. And he said, I end up walking him in his car and said, it's going to be okay. You know. So he went to his hospital visit, and later on he met that guy again and said, you know, how wonderful that little talk is. Something happened to him, a little conversation like that. He said, you spared me from trouble. Because I was praying, he said, and I told the Lord, please, Lord, send somebody who will just talk to me. And this Methodist bishop was he said, oh, I heard God. It was a nudge. And it was he said, I have never experienced that in my life. He's already old. He said, I have never experienced that in my life. Meaning, he may be a bishop, but as far as the art of listening to God is concerned, he has not trained himself how to listen to God. You and I, we need to train ourselves on listening to God. After I got born again, that's one of the things that interests me the most. I'll close my eyes. I will see if I can hear His audible voice. If I can feel it in my heart, you know. If I can feel some vibration. I was listening to all of these testimonies. Do I feel electricity, you know? And all of those things. Some Christians say they felt a cold wind blowing, and so it was very hot where I sleep, so I cannot feel any cold wind at all. So God must be silent. We have no AC. So I was asking for all of those stuff, and I read people like Yonggi Cho pray 5 hours or 3 hours a day. I tried, I fall asleep. You know? Have you ever, guys, fell asleep while praying? Yeah. I mean, I went through all of that. But there were times I thought I heard God, only to find out it must not be God. But there were times that I felt such a strong conviction, and it's confirmed that it must be God. So a lot of those things that we will be discussing, because as the days of His coming approaches, we need to know how to listen to the voice of God. Remember, one of the prophecies is, in the last days, many false prophets will rise. And you know what false prophets do is they claim they have a message from God that they will deliver to you. Okay? Now, that is somebody who claims, I hear God, and I am delivering it to you. You know how much authority a person can have when they can claim they have the word of the Lord and they are giving it to you? If you are ignorant. The moment somebody claims, God told me this for you, they hold so much authority already, if you are ignorant. And I am saying that because a lot of people have told me that this is what the Lord told me about you. And I've always, because when that happened, the Lord has already taught me a lot of things. I know how to handle that. I know how to filter the word of the Lord in my life. In my Bible, this is not my Bible. My Bible is there. But in my Bible, there are notes here. What I do is, whenever God speaks to me, I put the date. And I say, I felt this is what God is telling me. And I write it down. And there are times I will look at that and I say, boy, it has been 4 months since I felt strongly God was telling me this. Yeah. There were times, seems like every week I'm hearing something from the Lord. But there were times I said, man, it's been a long time, 6 months. I have never written down anything because if I felt God was telling me something, I will write it down. And the most that the Lord gave me a series of words, I think, was during COVID. When I was struggling hard, when people are saying we're going to change the way God we conduct church, and one of the words that God gave me is nothing changed. The Lord was impressing upon my heart. I'm not surprised by this. Nothing changed. What I told you before is still true today. And really, after all of this, look, the services are the same. But you know how many people have said, we will change the way we do things. Thank God I did not listen to that. Otherwise, we will sell the building and we'll have e-service, and you will have e-offering. You know what e-offering is? Empty offering, because you don't have a building to maintain. But it did not bother me because when God told me nothing changed, I just understood it. Right. Whatever God says before is still true today. You see, but that is an easy grab of information. But when you are panicky, you forget that. And one of the things that we always forget is what the Lord told us before. And how many of us are more than willing to abandon what we claim is God's word to us before? We are willing to abandon that. Now, God initiates prayer. Let me look at Psalm 27, verse 8. I will read this to you from two translations, CSB and NASB. Let me start with CSB. My heart says this about you. That's why you have to be careful when you compare translation. Some of these translations, like CSB here, some of these translations are actually like amplified. King James tried to be as faithful as possible, but NIV, there's a lot of interpretative translation. NASB is good. Some of the worst, if they are not translations, Amplified Bible is bad because multiple choice. The Message is another bad paraphrasing because it's just a paraphrase. The TEB is one of those. But NASB tried to be as faithful as possible. CSB is good, it's in between. My heart says this about you, seek His face, Lord, I will seek your face. Look at the NASB. When thou didst say, seek my face, my heart said to thee, thy face, O Lord, I shall seek. You see, I like the NASB because it says, when you say in my heart, when thou sayest, seek ye my face. Look at what David says. My heart, O Lord, says, thy face do I seek. You see, now it's a heart conversation. Meaning God put it in your heart. This is when whatever you were doing, you felt, I'll use the term nudge. You felt a nudge in your spirit. God is telling you something. Immediately your heart responds. By the way, that can happen while you are praying. That can happen while you are listening to the Word or reading the Word. That's why whenever I pray now, my mode of prayer has changed. I always walk because I fall asleep when I sit down. So I will always start with worshiping the Lord, but I will always say, Lord, I'm here. I'm seeking your face right now. Uh, I would love to hear your voice. I will tell the Lord that. And I'll do that for a better part of my prayer. Yeah. And this is what normally happens. By the way, I have a list of things I pray for regularly in my prayer life. But then suddenly, while I'm seeking the face of God, suddenly in my heart, prayer requests will be dropped. Like I will remember, I have to pray for this person. I'll immediately pray for that person until the burden, for lack of better term, until the burden is lifted. By the way, when somebody comes to mind or a situation comes to mind, I pray for that event or situation. I don't stop praying until I receive peace. Because now you are interceding. The moment I receive peace, I'll move on. I'll move on. And sometimes it becomes a very conversational thing. You begin to say, well, is that what you want me to do, Lord? You see, these are not formulaic. These are things that developed in time. So that passage shows that God initiates prayer or conversations with him. We see this in the life of Abraham. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, the Lord said to Abram, the Lord said, he initiates it. He spoke to Abraham. Chapter 22, verse 1. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. Now this time, Abraham was more conversant with God and is more familiar with the voice of God. And God spoke to him and says, Abraham. What did Abraham says? Here I am. Wow, that is a beautiful conversation. A prophet who doesn't know that was Samuel. He was a young boy, and he's not familiar with the voice of God, and the Lord spoke to him. Samuel, Samuel. He thought it was the voice of Eli. By the way, this is where I drew the conclusion that when God speaks to us sometimes, he uses the voice that are familiar with us. Remember when I had my accident in my Ford truck, and I woke up, and my truck was climbing up, however you want that, how I call that, and James and Joel were at the back of the truck, and Ann was beside me sleeping, and I woke up, and I was not holding on the wheels, and I heard the word of the Lord came to me, and it's the voice of James. It's his voice. It says, you are in control of this car now. And I held on to the car, stepped on the brake. When I pushed the brake, it was not biting. I pumped it again, it bit. But the voice came to me, you are in control of the car now. So I asked James, did you tell me that? He said, no. I am busy trying to protect Joel. Was holding on to Joel. But I heard it. Because I think if God spoke to me in the voice of a monkey, I will dismiss it. Right? But if it's a voice I am familiar with, I'll pay attention. Samuel paid attention to the voice because it sounded like Eli. Who is Eli? That's his boss. You have to pay attention to that. Because Eli, he is the aide of Eli, so he better pay attention. I don't care if it's in the middle of the night. If he wants some water, you better bring him some water. And so the attention is there, and God used that. Okay? And so, these are the things that I saw in the scriptures. I'm sure other people had seen it. I've not read their books. But I've seen it, and I begin to be more familiar with how God talks. I don't know how many people have told me and say, well, Pastor said, I had a dream. And the dream gave me this instruction. I never thought much of it. I said, why? It's your voice that I heard. That's why they did not pay attention. But I know why. It was my voice that they heard. Because they always hear me preach. So the word of the Lord for some people always comes through the vehicle of my vocal cords. Therefore, that's the familiar voice. But you have to make a distinction if it's from the Lord or not. Okay? This is a good way of talking to God. Today, this is mostly known, or believers are very familiar with this term, being familiar with the word of the Lord, in terms of reading the Bible. Through the scriptures, the Lord speaks to us. What was this? I was very sick. This is one of those stories I told you. I was going to Bible school. I was finishing up my electrical engineering course. My Bible school is in Antipolo. My class will start at around, I think, 9 in the evening. It will end, my goodness, I think around 11. And so I will travel by bus. I'll be home by around 12:30 midnight. I was getting sick because I was a Sunday school teacher. I was a deacon. And I was just getting sick. And so I went home one evening. You know, when you're sick, your mental faculties are not working that well. And your body is dragging you down. Because when you're sick, your body is spending its energy towards fighting that sickness. And so it will divert energy use to fight that sickness, if you understand how your body works. And so I went into our apartment building, and I had a homework. I was fifth year in college. I had 3 design classes. Some of you who understand design, it's time consuming. I entered the door, I shut it behind me, and I was just standing like that. You know? And I was feeling very self-righteous. And I said, how many young man is doing this? I said, I am wearing myself out. I'm killing myself. How many, I almost tell myself, I have no life, you know. I attend every service, Sunday, all the services, Monday, youth night, Wednesday night, Bible study, and Friday night service. I just attend everything. And because I love the word of the Lord. And I said, how many young men are doing this? And it came to my mind. I said, I think I'm going to quit now. I need to have a life. I don't need this. And just like that, the word of the Lord came to me. It's too foolish to quit now. And it was shot in my spirit like nothing else. It woke me up. By the way, that night the Lord healed me. You see? But here I am beginning to be familiar with the voice of God. And so I got prostrated with sickness and disease. I have always struggled with sickness and disease. I have always known in my heart, we don't have a reason to be sick. I don't know why it's been there for the longest time. And I'm beginning to understand because of eternal life. And I have already read my Bible, I think, twice during this time. And I was so prostrated because I've been reading books. I told the Lord, every time I come up with an answer, there are more questions about healing. Specifically about healing. I said, every time. And I was very prostrated. And while I was prostrated, the Lord spoke to me and says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I said, wow, I've heard that somewhere. Or I've read that somewhere. I was a newly born again. I said, I've read that somewhere. But it was very clear. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Later on, I found out it's in Hosea. You see, but I kept it in my heart. I'm not that type of person that when the Lord says something, I will jump up. Hey, the Lord told me this. No, I kept it in my heart. I said, I've read that somewhere. Maybe I heard it somewhere. But I kept reading my Bible, and in my next reading, I was in Hosea. I said, oh, this is it. This is what God told me. You see, now it confirms. The Lord did not say anything extra special. It's just quoting the scriptures. But your best conversation with God will be coming from the scriptures. Because if He says anything, or if you claim you heard something outside of the Word, I will guarantee you 100%, it's not God. Because God will never deviate from His Word, okay? So some of you may be thinking, well, God told me this. I know the Bible says this, but God told me this. Forget it. You're not listening to God. God will never violate His word. And so that's an excellent way of talking to God. Psalm 119, verse 18. Psalm 119, verse 18. Open my eyes so that I may contemplate wondrous things from your instruction or from your word. Now, now granted that David doesn't own a scroll. He's only hearing it from how do you call this thing? The tent, the tabernacle. He's hearing it from when the priest reads it from the tabernacle. And so, the Torah reading, he said, open my eyes that I may meditate or contemplate on these wondrous things from your instructions. So now David is giving us here an idea. For us to be able to understand this word, the Lord has to open our eyes. So listen. So now you say, I'm having my devotion. Although the proper biblical term, I'm going to meditate. Okay? So from David's instruction, you say, Lord, I'm going to meditate on your word right now. Speak to me. By the way, that meditation is all day long. You will be reading a portion of the scriptures, and you may not understand it while reading it. But now you ask the Lord, open my eyes, Lord, that I may understand wondrous things from your instructions. So, most of the time it's like this. While you are reading the book, then I got it. For us, don't ever think that you're too smart to understand it. Because you just prayed, Lord, open my eyes. What happened when you begin to understand it and see it? God opened your eyes. So what is the conclusion now? If God opened your eyes, He answered your prayers. You see, as simple as that. Whenever you begin to come to an understanding of the scriptures, He is answering your prayer. Or, better put, He is talking to you. You see, we keep looking for an audible voice. You will never hear the audible voice of God. Never. God is a spirit. He doesn't talk through here. He talks through here. My learning is, the moment you become more familiar with the voice of the Lord, when it comes to you, it will become so clear, it will look as if it is an audible voice. But it is so clear. Have you ever had a signal with somebody? No conversation. Hey, when I give you the signal, time to go, right? So you're 10 yards away, and you say, no verbal communication. And he look at you and say, and you went on the same direction. What happened? You have a conversation. But there are no audible voice. But it is as good as an audible voice. Only the two of you will understand it. You just signal. And then you understood. Okay? So, this is what we have to develop because the word of the Lord is the standard. Now, let's take this kind of conversation because I would like to keep saying that anybody who thinks he heard from God, it is contrary to the written word. And it's contrary to the written word, you are not hearing from God. Get it in your head. If you say something that is contrary to the scriptures, that is not from God. Okay? Look, primarily, day of the Lord or Sabbath day. Well, the work called me and I'm beginning to really go into this. The work called me and I will be fired if I celebrate the day of the Lord. Now let me ask you this question. Don't you think God knows that? God knows that. But He gave His command. Now this, remember before in this same church, I will just simply say, well, I can't do anything about that. You're in medical field and you're petitioned by your company, you're dependent on your company, so you have to obey. But the more I think about it, because something doesn't sit right with me, I begin to have conversations with other Christians, especially the Seventh-day Adventists. It turned out the Seventh-day Adventists, they're so hardworking and excellent workers. A lot of the Seventh-day Adventists, when they tell their boss, I can't work on Saturday, they don't work on Saturday. And their boss respects their work so much, they are given that leeway. I said, how about us? Oh, and then 911 came. The Muslims can demand it now. In fact, right now, it's so bad that a Muslim teacher can stop working saying, we are having, how do you call it, Ramadan or whatever. The school can't even force these teachers to show up. They are given that extension. But we Christians who have always agreed they can touch us and there will be no complaint. So now I have this balancing thing. No, well, our business makes money on Sunday. Well, it so happened that we have an example from our church in the Philippines. They rent us a space at SM, but he got convicted on the day of the Lord, and so he closed his shop on Sundays. And he told us this: the income he is making Monday through Saturday is the same as the income he was making when he was opening on Sunday. Another example that we have right now, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A. They even tried to close the thing, and the moment they did that, the income doubled. Because now people are lining up. So I have these examples. I have these examples. And so now it creates more conversational partners in my head as far as understanding the scriptures is concerned. But then it goes back to this. God says, this is an everlasting command. This is permanent. Yeah, we will have all of our reasons, but I cannot change the scriptures. I mean, it still says, forsake not the gathering of the assemblies together. Forsake it not, you know. And that is there. Now, of course, I still understand all the reasoning, but the moment I compare it with the word of the Lord, I have to make a personal decision. Which is Bible and which is not. Which is the word of the Lord and which is not. And by the way, there are villages now in Israel, and I have been in one. They call it, and they call it Kedem or something like that. Kedem, if not Kefir. And these are all ultra-Orthodox Jews. They really celebrate the Sabbath. I was there in, I call that the Jubilee. I was in Israel during that time, the 50th year. Not the exact celebration, but the 50th year. And we were hosted by this village chief. This is remote Israel. Well, remote Israel. Israel is very small, but it's remote Israel. We have to go there. And he showed us how to make bread and all of those things. And there were grapes, there were all kinds of fruits growing in his farm. And one of the students says, those grapes are ready to be picked. And he says, you pick them. Oh, can I? Oh, that's not mine. And the student says, but this is yours. No, it's not mine. This is the year of Jubilee, he said. Everything that you see here is not mine. It's the Lord's. He said, anybody can walk in my property and pick on the produce of this land. It's theirs. Because that's not mine. He said, I can pick some fruits. The Lord allows me that. But that's not mine. This year, it's the Lord's. So now there are villages in Israel that are trying to follow the word of the Lord, because the word of the Lord is eternal. So I have these patterns. That's why you have to open your eyes and begin to see what others do. And they are living well. They are living well. You know? And so now the more I hear of excuses, the more I say, that doesn't sound right. That really doesn't sound right. Pastor, it's very difficult. I have debts. I know that. I have been there. But that doesn't sound right. Why? Because God knows all of that before we were even born. And the word is written as it is written. You can make all kinds of reasons or excuses, But that is still the word of the Lord. And the word of the Lord is eternal. You cannot change it. The Lord talks to Jacob then, okay, in Genesis chapter 31. Let me start reading it from verse 1. I'll read up to verse 13. Now Jacob heard what Laban's sons were saying. Jacob has taken all that was our father's and has built his wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob saw from Laban's face that his attitude toward him was not the same as before. Look at this. Jacob saw from Laban's face, the face of his father-in-law, no longer the same as before. By the way, we can see that from each other's face. You can tell if something is wrong with the relationship. Look at the face. Look at the face. And Laban saw it. Jacob saw it from Laban. Okay. Jacob had Rachel. Oh, so after he saw this in verse 3, the Lord said to him, "Go back to the land of your ancestors and to your family, and I will be with you." Jacob and Rachel and Leah called to the field. Jacob had Rachel and Leah called to the field where his flocks were. He said to them, "I can see from your father's face that his attitude toward me is not the same as before. But the God of my father has been with me. You know that with all my strength I have served your father, and that he has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God has not let him harm me. If he said the spotted sheep will be your wages, then all the sheep were born spotted. If he said the straight sheep will be your wages, then all the sheep were born straight. God has taken away your father's herds and given them to me. When the flocks were breeding, I saw in a dream that the straight, spotted, and speckled males were mating with the females. In that dream, the angel of God said to me, 'Jacob,' and I said, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Look up and see. All the males that are mating with the flocks are straight, spotted, and speckled. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you poured oil on the stone marker and made a solemn vow to me, get up, leave this land, and return to your native land.'" This is a story. Why did God appear to him in a dream? This is a story of Jacob overstaying in Laban's house. He felt very comfortable. By the way, I've noticed this about God. God is in the business of stretching your faith. Now, when God told me to come to the U.S., it was 1983. I came here. 1990, right? I came in 1990. So that's a lot of years. But 83, God spoke to me. You know, I had a lot of titles in my name because of the ministry I was doing in the Philippines. You can be very comfortable. By the way, when I left, we just had the biggest increase in our salary. I think our salary increased by 400% because our salary was ignored for years. So it increased by 400%. And I so happened to be there's the pastor. And then the next level of rank were only 4 of us. So the increase was tremendous. And then the church was about to buy cars for us. Every pastor has a car. Yeah. In the Philippines, if we have a car during that time, and even now, boy, that's sikat yan talaga. May kotse ka. Meron kang chikot, you know. So the church was about to buy cars for us. All of that has it. Yeah. And then I was one of those who started traveling, even overseas. So things are good. By the way, during that time, the who's who, even those coming from the U.S., coming to the Philippines, I have met almost all of them, you know. And my pastor will always send me to host some of these people. And so it was doing very good. But I think my faith became stagnant. Yeah, you feel very comfortable. And I found out about God is, it's up to you whether you will accept the challenge or not. I found that God is a God who always stretches you. He will stretch your faith. Just when you are feeling comfortable about your faith level, He will stretch that. He will, at least that's what, look, I'm getting old, and I think my wife told me, what 65 years old now, the retirement age. In a few years, I could retire. I have no plan on retiring. And now this thing in my heart keeps burning about having a headquarters in the Philippines. Sometimes I tell God, don't you think I'm old? You know, I tell that God, I'm feeling some pains in my body sometimes. Don't you think I'm old? But the Lord will keep stretching your faith. How far will He stretch your faith? How do you know whether God will stretch your faith? You're giving $10 right now, and He asks you to give $10.01. No, that's not a stretch. Have you guys ever stretched? How do you know you're really doing well when you're stretching? You feel it, and you feel pain. Yeah. At one time, DJ and I were in the Y, and I was stretching. I think I stretched too much. I was on the floor and I was stretching, and DJ was beside me, and I heard this. The moment I heard it, I could not stand up. I was literally rolling on the floor just to stand up. And maybe the other people in the gym think that I was still stretching. No, that wasn't stretching. Something snapped on my back. And DJ, I was driving my truck, the old truck, and DJ said, Papa, let me drive. I said, no. And I was just in pain. I stretched too much. I know I have stretched. It gave me pain. The Lord is not going to give you injury like that. But you know that your faith is being stretched because you begin to feel this holy discomfort. You think it's comfortable when I left the Philippines with all of those titles and all of those ministries, and God told me, go. You have stayed here long enough. From Deuteronomy chapter 1, break camp. You think that was comfortable, and then you don't have a visa. And so, how distraught I was during those days. No visa, and I have a lot of students, so they will ask, oh, Pastor, say, let's have lunch. And they know I have no more salary. Let's have lunch, and let's plan the seminar. So we'll have lunch. In all of the lunches that I've had, not one of my friends paid. It's making my girlfriend back then very uncomfortable. And he said, why don't you tell them to pay? I said, I'm not going to beg to anybody. That's something that the Lord taught me. I'm just not going to beg to anybody. And so she was furious. She was just my girlfriend. But she was very furious. None of my friends, pastors who are of faith, even pulled their wallet to pay. Yeah, none, zero. My wife knows that. And she was very upset. I said, don't worry about it. But my faith was stretched. And I felt it, you know. But you know, it was okay. Because the moment the Lord was done stretching my faith, I realized I can really do it. Can you imagine I can leave the Philippines, resign from all my job, with very few dollars in my pocket. That's why marrying my wife with $107, that's minor compared to what I did 3 years earlier. My faith, I don't feel the pain anymore. My faith has been stretched. Well, the pain came when we started this church, and I said, in 2 years, we're going to buy our building. There's another pain there. And then the first service, I said, in 5 years, we're going to move to our second building. Now, there's another pain there. You see? But my faith kept being stretched. There are certain things, like if you start stretching, you may not be able to reach your toe. Well, I can't reach my toe. So I'm not going to give you an example. James can reach his toe. I will not ask him. He will brag. You know. Before I can reach my toe, now I can't reach my toe. Okay. If you're starting and stretching and you try to reach your toe, it's painful. But the moment you can reach it, you know. When I was at the Y before, there are some people, there's this, I think she's a gymnast. Every time she stretches, I will feel pain. You know, she always she always works out with her husband, and he's helping her stretch. And I will see some of the things they're doing when they're stretching. I was the one feeling the pain. I said, how can these people do this? There's pain involved. But they can do it, and they're doing it with a smile. It's no longer painful to them. By the way, when God stretches your faith, after you stretch, even if you feel good. Oh, I woke up these muscles. You feel good. You know that your faith is being stretched and you're responding to it properly because it doesn't give you a sour face. It puts joy in your face. Are you listening? Because there's a certain joy when God tells you to do something and you feel discomfort and you went through the process. After that, joy comes in the morning. You see? And it's no longer the accomplishment, it's the obedience that you begin to feel. However, if you fail, the very memory of what you disobeyed on will bring you pain. It will bring you pain, okay? Now, so, I believe that Jacob overstayed. And I look at the clock, it's 9 o'clock. I don't want to overstay, okay? We'll continue next week. We'll talk more about the art of listening.